Welcome to the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast, where we hope to inspire you to embrace your God-given gifts, skills, and passions in order to lead with confidence. We want you to remember that you are fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of God, and you are fully loved by Him.
You have been designed on purpose by God with unique gifts and passions in order to love and lead those around you. I'm your host, Esther Littlefield, a pastor's wife, business owner, mom, and writer.
And I'm Esther's co-host, Holly Kane. I'm a wife, mom, and business owner. I also write at hollykane.org, where I focus on my passion for women's ministry.
Together, we chat about important issues that Christian women leaders face. In addition, we interview other women just like you who lead in various roles, from church to community to business. Through this podcast, we offer you encouragement, tools, and resources to help you on your leadership journey. We are so glad you're here with us. Welcome to episode 131. I am your host, Esther Littlefield, and today I am with Holly again, and we are continuing in our series to wrap up the year. And today we're going to talk about processing relationships. Right, Holly?
Yes.
We've just been doing a little bit of processing before we started recording. That does not need to be shared with the world, right?
Right. 100%.
So we're going to spend a few minutes today diving into how we can process the year in light of our relationships and some of the things that have been going on throughout the year. So just a quick reminder, if you have not listened to episode 128, we want to encourage you to go back and listen to that. We had a conversation with Sandy Fluelling, and she offered us some soul care around dealing with the year and helping us to just go through and process. So a lot of what we're taking right now is coming out of that episode. So it's going to make more sense if you listen to that first. And then if you listen to last week's episode 130, we kicked off this little series that we're kind of wrapping up the year with, doing something a little bit differently than we've done in the past. And we started last week by talking about processing our circumstances. So the other thing I want to mention before we dive in is that we did create a downloadable PDF with just the list of questions. It's nothing fancy. It's just the list of questions that we're going through in this series. So you can grab that and follow along and maybe grab a journal and, a few minutes alone and answer some of these questions for yourself. So to get that, you just go to estherlittlefield.com/episode 131, and we will have that link for you to grab the PDF there. So one more thing, if you're on my email list and you're listening to this in real time, I will also be emailing that out to you. So you don't necessarily have to go sign up for it. You'll get it right in your email inbox. So Holly, you want to get us started? Kick us off here?
Well, I just want to say that the PDF that you created is really adorable. So It's not just useful, it's really cute too.
Yeah, it's just not like an actual guide for people to write in. It's not that fancy, but it is going to have all the questions that we talk about in these 3 episodes so that it just makes it easier than, we don't want you, if you're driving, when you're listening to this, to trying to be writing down the questions as you drive. Don't do that. So the PDF just makes it super easy. And it has all 3, the questions from all 3 episodes in it. So it's really, I think it'll be helpful for everybody.
Yeah. And it's cute.
Exactly.
Which, of course, I don't know why I felt like I had to say that again, but I did.
It's got to be pretty for our listeners.
Agreed.
We want them to enjoy it.
Agreed. So. It's like a nice little gift from us.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. So today we are talking about processing relationships, and I just want to review a couple of things that we chatted with Sandy about. And the first thing is she talked about practicing radical acceptance, which is just about radically accepting your circumstances and the relationships and how things are, which sounds super duper obvious. But I don't know, for me, I like to be in denial about things. And so instead of making things harder on ourselves and just pretending like they don't exist, just taking a super huge risk of just accepting how things are and sort of moving on. And we recognize that we've always disagreed with people, but it seems that people have less of a filter this year. Through the many things that we've dealt with this year, it seems like the filters have just come down levels by levels, just so many things. So, and then the other thing that we wanted to recognize is that the issues that we're dealing with are not easy. They're very complex issues. And we're dealing with them as a group. We're not dealing them in sort of one pocket or one little area. It's, worldwide. This is a global thing we're all dealing with. So we want to work through processing that. And as we do, the first thing that we really want to do is recognize the large loss that we're experiencing. And I know that I mentioned during the episode when we were talking with Sandy that sometimes we don't even realize we have something to grieve. And so this is a really good time as you're kind of working through the journaling prompts and as we're talking about this to really name the losses that you've experienced. And we're going to do that. So, Esther, do you want to tell us some of the losses that you've had this year? It feels really vulnerable, but we're going to do it.
I was just going to say, this is a chance for us to practice vulnerability because like the stuff we're talking about is not easy stuff. So yeah, I'll start. Of course. Yeah. So I think that one of the things that has been the hardest this year in terms of relationships is just how the connections with friends and family have changed so much. And the ways that I am normally with those people have changed. So in some ways, I've been with certain people way more than usual, i.e. my immediate family, which has its good and bad parts. And then, in other ways, I've spent a lot less time with really good friends, that I really enjoy spending time with. I haven't spent as much time with them. So that has been a loss for sure. Just the normal activities that we like to do, like going out for girls' night or even going to a small group at my church. Like I haven't done that this year in the ways that I've done that before. And then just personally and very selfishly, I turned 40 this year and I really had big plans for my 40th birthday party or a birthday, not party, birthday experience. Because Holly knows I like to really celebrate. So when I turned 35, we did a big trip to Boston with, some girlfriends and it was so much fun. We just had an amazing time. And so I really wanted to do something similar for my 40th. And we actually were going to go to New York City, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So we booted that plan when New York City became the hub of COVID. Yep. And then we talked about going to Tampa. We had lots of plans. And every time, it just felt like every time we sort of had a plan figured out, then something would happen where cases would spike or something would happen that made us feel concerned about doing that thing.
Yeah.
And then we ended up going to Vermont, which was really fun. But then you ended up not being able to come. And that was like, that was a loss because it was like really something that I wanted to do with my friends. And I was just having a pity party that things didn't work the way I wanted to. And it was like in the big scheme of life, not that big of a deal. But, it was still a loss of just like kind of the anticipation of what you expected to happen wasn't able to happen.
But we've been talking about this for a couple of years.
Oh,
like right. It's not like we just were like, oh, Esther's turning 40, so we should do this. Like this, we've been talking about it because you and a couple other people kind of all are around the same age.
Yeah.
And so, we were like, well, we should definitely do this because we work hard and we have have a lot on our plates. And so getting a little bit of time away together would be super fun. And we had extravagant ideas, we had 2 years out.
Some realistic ideas and then some non-realistic ideas, but even the realistic ideas got thrown out the window when this whole pandemic happened, so obviously there's a lot of other things, but those were some of the big ones that I thought of when I was thinking about just like this year in general. And I think probably on a deeper level, and maybe one that I don't like thinking about as much, is just like I feel like there's been losses in relationships in the sense of like sort of recognizing that we don't necessarily see eye to eye on certain things, and that there's been times where that has felt like there's been a not a breakdown in the relationship, but a wedge, I guess, in the relationship because of a different perspective on various things happening in the year. So what about you? What are yours?
Well, before I say mine really quick, I turn 40 not this January, but the next January. So let's plan for
Okay.
mine.
That's right.
Okay.
Yep. Redo.
Redo. We all get a redo.
I'll just say
Everyone.
40 and then we
Yes.
can celebrate you turning 40.
You can turn 40
Yeah.
not this January, but next January.
Okay.
Sound
I'm
good?
down. Yep.
Okay. Because I'm going to really need some emotional support when that happens. So if you could be there for me, that'd be
Okay.
great.
I'll be there for you.
And if you could be there maybe like in a European country or on a
Yeah.
cruise ship, that would
Yes.
be even better. Okay. So last time when we talked about this, the last episode, when we started these reflections, you, Esther, talked about how you felt like this year was really stripping stuff away. And I kind of mentioned that for me, I felt like that was the year before, like when we moved. But because of that, we got really kind of used to people coming and visiting us and seeing us. And whether it was family or friends coming to visit, that was something that was really enjoyable and kind of a bright spot in what feels like a long and I won't say painful, but long, arduous process of getting settled in Florida. However many years later, I feel like I'm still talking about this. But anyway, having our friends and family visit was always really exciting. And so that hasn't obviously happened. My sister would usually come at least once or twice a year. And anyway, so that's been something that, has been weird. We're not used to. We always would at least take a vacation. We really love our traveling time and seeing people. And so that was difficult. Those are things I like to have something to look forward to, whether it's someone coming to see us or us
Right.
going somewhere. And so I was saying to my husband yesterday, like, we have a boring life. I always love to have something to look forward to. And I feel like because of sort of the climate of things, it's really hard to plan ahead and it's really hard to figure out whether or not these things can even be done. And so not having something to look forward to in those ways is really weird for me.
Mhm.
And so that's been difficult. And so that's kind of on a circumstantial, I mean, I know that's relationship wise, but a little bit more circumstantial, but then sort of more on the relationship side of things. For me, there's been losses in relationships as far as like our relationships used to be this way. And then now that we've sort of experienced and gone through this year, our relationships have changed. And to some extent, those are good. But then to some extent, I've had a few realizations that I kind of am saying to myself, I never thought it would be this way. And it feels kind of like what you had said, like a wedge almost between
Mhm.
me and a couple other people. And to some extent, it may just be on my side that I'm realizing that we, like you said, don't see eye to eye on things and they're kind of core issues to some extent. And so it's difficult because you feel, or at least for me in these relationships, I felt like, we were really like on the same wavelength about a lot of things. And then this year has really uncovered things that we just don't agree
Yeah.
on. And so it's not necessarily that the relationship, like you said, has fallen away or decreased in any way. It's just figuring out how to navigate it in this sort of new realization. Obviously the people are still in my life. I still love them. We still have a relationship, but it's just, how do we navigate that now? And it's hard to not feel sad or feel upset about that and to not act differently, which is so right, because I certainly don't want to bring attention to anything that, is maybe just me trying to figure it out and make it awkward and make it weird. And so I won't go on any further, but that's that's kind of where I'm at. And I hope you understand what I'm saying, because it seems a little bit not concrete.
Well, we don't want to like name names and talk about specific circumstances on the show, but I think people can resonate with what you're saying. It definitely, because even just thinking about, immediate family members, I can think of in my family, immediate family members, that we have different perspectives on things. And that before this year, that may never have been an issue, but this year it has been. So it's definitely shaken things up.
Yes,
so,
definitely. Yeah.
Okay. So the next thing that we want to talk about in relation to relationships, didn't mean to say that, but I did. So and what Sandy recommended is that she said we need to let ourselves grieve. So the next question is, how have you grieved? and or what do you need to do to allow yourself to grieve these losses? Because part of being a healthy leader and being in a healthy place is actually allowing yourself to deal with the emotions and the challenges that we experience on a regular basis. So,
Mm.
Holly, do you want to share how you've grieved or how you
Yeah.
let yourself do that?
So which is why I love doing this podcast probably so much, is that I'm a verbal processor. So I love talking to people about stuff. And so for me, really talking to my sort of safe people about the stuff that I need to kind of talk about. And honestly, it's one of those things where I don't know that I'm even realizing that it's grief. It's just, I have these realizations about things and then I just talk to, like, for example, my husband about them. Kind of like the thought that I had yesterday where I was like, we don't have anything to look forward to. Like, it's that type of stuff that I'm
Yeah.
talking about. And so just being able to kind of process that with those people has been really good. And then for me, going to do the things that we can do. So maybe we can't take a cruise, we can't go on this huge vacation, but we live in a really great vacation place. So
Yeah.
it's not vacation land, but there are lots of things that we can do. And there are lots of things that can feel like we're getting away right here at home that
Yeah.
are safe and comfortable and can provide a little bit of escapism. I know that escapism isn't always great, but we all need a little bit of that to kind of decompress and let things kind of process. So doing that and then finding the joyful times in every day, which probably is the hardest one for me because I get my head like down into things. I'm working on the to-do list, I'm working on whatever. And I have a very difficult time sort of looking up and getting a good perspective and really seeing these things for what they are and allowing myself to, laugh at the funny thing. We don't always have to be serious, enjoying, game time with my family, all of those type of things. When the to-do list gets in the way, sometimes I have a really hard time doing that. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, Esther, what about you? How have you grieved?
Okay. So I am a written processor. So that's where we're different. Although I do still like talking with others about it. And that's one of the things that I've done for sure. But I definitely have found myself at times needing to just sit down and do more writing to work through some of the things that are going on. Crying, hey, that's a
That's
grief
a really
release
good
for
one.
me at times. And also, I think getting outside and, like you were saying, doing the things
Mm,
we can do. So for
yeah.
me here at home, especially in the summer when it was spring and summer, I was trying to get out and go for a walk on a regular basis. And then, going to the ocean or just going for a hike or different things that we could do that didn't involve, being in a big crowd of people, but also could be
Mm,
outside of my normal
yeah.
routine. That really helped me a lot. Like, not just with grieving, but also just with staying mentally healthy
Yeah,
to
definitely.
do those things. So, yeah. Yeah.
So the third thing that we talked about with Sandy is that we need to remember that everyone is grieving. I have already said this, but we haven't really experienced this type of grieving in a long time as a country, as a global world. And so it's important to remember that when we're talking about these sort of small individual processing of relationships, because it definitely plays a huge part. So we want to talk about what are some practical ways that we can show grace to others who are grieving. So do you have any ideas about that?
Yeah. I think one of the big things for me that I have to try to remember is to take a step back before reacting
Yeah.
to people's statements, comments,
Hmm.
responses to emotional situations, whether it's in person or online, but it's obviously been more online this year because we've been doing so much online. But really kind of taking a step back and realizing, okay, this person, perhaps they're hurting in some way, and that may be playing into the way that they're treating someone right now. And then also making an extra effort to be kind in my responses, which I don't always do well, but really trying to think about, okay, how can I say something or do I even need to say something? Oftentimes I don't need to. And sometimes I still do, but like even just in the way you're interacting, like I've thought about it a lot with the people, especially in like when I've gone to go grocery shopping or just to go into a store. I just think about the way that so many people are being treated that work in retail.
Mm,
Like they're just being treated so poorly
yeah.
because they're needing to enforce certain guidelines and they're being treated poorly by people that disagree with the guidelines. And I just try to go a little bit over. I try to remember to treat them extra nice because I
Yeah.
just think they don't deserve to be treated poorly because they're doing their job. That's
Mm,
my perspective. And then ask people how they are really doing. I think that's another thing that I have tried to keep in mind because I've been thinking about like, because I'm not spending as much time face to face with some of my friends and some family members, I haven't had as much chance to really check in with them. Like, how are you actually doing
mm,
right now? And so I think that's another thing that we can do to give people space that if they're grieving, if they have the opportunity to share something that, if you ask, they might be able to share. So
yeah.
those are my thoughts on that. What about you? What are your tips on this?
So mine obviously echo a lot of what you have to say, but just maybe don't comment on social media. Just don't comment. Just if you see something, just scroll on by. And I think for
Are
me,
you talking to me?
no, I mean, if the shoe fits, you're the only one who can figure that one out.
Since we just had a conversation this morning about my commenting on an issue.
For me, I had to go, okay, like that post annoyed me, that post annoyed me, that post annoyed me. And then I had to kind of take a step back and go, okay, is this really good use of my time to just be getting worked up and getting annoyed and getting frustrated? And I had a situation, oh my gosh, this was 2 or 3 years ago where this particular person was really stressing me out on Facebook. And this was a person in my life. Like I could not get, they just will always be in my life. And so I made the conscious choice to unfollow them and unfriend them on Facebook. And I sent them a message and said, I need to unfollow you and unfriend you because our relationship is more important than social media. And so I challenge you that and you need to figure out whether or not that's a message that you can send to someone because that might be the beginning of an argument. But I knew with that person, I could say that. And
Yeah.
I said, our relationship, I need to be able to see you where I see you and not be angry at you because of something I'm thinking about that you posted. I want to just be able to be like loving towards you. And so it's more healthy for me to just unfollow you. And so it's really important to kind of have those thoughts and have that sort of step back in perspective about is the relationship in real life more important than the fact that you're friends on Facebook? Like,
Right.
what's more important to you? And then for me, the other thing is like when I find that someone is really frustrating me, if I can take a step back and then in a day or so, just message them and say, hey, how are you doing? And it kind of helps me forget about the thing that is frustrating me or the thing that I disagree with or the thing that's getting me riled up and helps me realize that this is a real person and not just someone who is pushing an agenda. And this helps me even more when these are real friends and real family, real people in my life, and helps me realize, that some of the stuff that they're going through, because oftentimes when I do check in on them, like what you said, ask them how they're really doing, they are bringing up struggles and things that I can be praying for. And when I can focus on that, it's so much better to be focusing on that than on the things that divide us.
Yeah.
And then that leads me to, in the Bible, it does say to be praying for your enemies. And you might think, well, this person's not my enemy. They're my, family member. But the things that you're reading or the things that you're going through or your differences, sometimes it can feel like your enemies
Yeah.
even in just that one area. And so praying for them can really soften that. And even just asking God to like soften your heart when it comes to those things is really helpful. And if you have taken the time to check in on them, then you'll have other things to pray about for them as well and might give you a different perspective. And I think for me, it's all about we get hyper focused on one thing. And if we can kind of pull the camera back or go to the, you know, 50,000-foot view rather than the 5-foot view, there's a whole lot more to the picture. And so if we can get that perspective, a lot of times it really helps us to give grace to people who are grieving and understand those things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
It does. Oh, awesome. Okay, so let's go to the next question. And let's see for the next couple questions if we can do rapid fire
Oh my goodness.
answers.
I
Okay.
know. Okay. I'm
So we're
sorry.
trying to make these episodes shorter. We have no guarantees on anything, but we have to just put a disclaimer on all of our episodes.
I can do it on the next one.
Okay.
Okay.
Because we kind of have already hit on some of these.
I know. And we're
topics,
agreeing
so I
with
don't
each
wanna,
other. So
yeah.
there's no point. All right.
Okay.
You
So
go.
rapid fire. How can we work toward healing in such a hostile time?
So I think that we can find common ground with people, sort of outside of the things that we disagree on, obviously, find things that we do have common ground on.
Yep.
We can look for admirable qualities in people. So, the whole verse, whatever is lovely, whatever is true.
Mm-hmm.
Apply that to a person, whatever is lovely about them, whatever is true about them, think on those things rather than on the stuff you disagree on. Mm-hmm. And then I think the other part is recognizing my own sinfulness. When you get a good view of who you really are in your sinfulness and how gross it can be, a lot of times other people's stuff doesn't look as bad. It's sort of the log in your own eye type thing. And I think recognizing and being really aware of where we're at is a good way to do that. So,
yeah,
because there's lots of stuff. I got lots of issues, man. Okay. Was that better? Was that faster?
That was good.
Okay.
You did good.
Okay. You go
Ready?
ahead.
I'm going to go. Okay. Listen more than we talk. I think that's a big one.
Yeah.
We can stop talking as much and just try to listen to people. I mean, not you and I. Obviously, we need to keep talking.
I was wondering if that was directly directed at me. Directed at me. Okay. Go ahead.
And like you said, I also had in my list, look for what we can agree upon. Like sometimes thinking about what is the common goal that we have. Like I honestly believe that most Americans want similar things in the long run. Like they want their kids to be healthy and they want the country to thrive. Like, so if we can think about like, what are the things we agree upon and how can we work together, even if we have different perspectives on how to get there.
Yeah.
And then emulate Jesus' character and attitude towards others. That's super helpful.
It's always a good one.
When it comes to working together. And obviously pray, I think too, there's things that we just have to pray about because we're not going to be able to solve some of these things without God's intervention and without prayer and without the Holy Spirit guiding us.
Yeah. So, agreed.
Okay, so we didn't really talk about this particular topic with Sandy, but there was one more thing I wanted to talk about in relation to relationships. I keep saying that. But basically it's about a support system because again, we have talked about on previous episodes, especially this year, we've talked about the importance of support systems as leaders, how we need to have other people kind of in our corner that can be there for us and that we can have for accountability and all that. So another quick rapid fire answer. Who has been part of your support system this year?
So I'm just going to name names.
Okay.
You and Zach and Sandy.
There we go.
Those have been my people.
That was quick.
That's awesome. There's been more.
Right.
But if we're talking about the most immediate people.
Yeah. Okay.
Those are them. What about you?
Okay, so I didn't write actual names, but I would say also I have a few close friends, you definitely included, and one or two others. And then a couple, I actually thought of a business coach and a business, like a couple business besties. So more in relation to business stuff, though they have been very much part of my support system. I would say my husband too.
That's good.
For sure. This year he has supported me in a lot of ways. So I think that, those people have been there for me. So on the other side of the coin, who do you feel like maybe you need to reach out to or offer support to or reconnect with that maybe you've grown disconnected with this year somehow?
Yeah. So for me, I think perhaps reaching out to that like next layer of people a little bit more intentionally is probably a good thing because, obviously those sort of core main people are great and they're in my life often, but it's those other next layer of people that I think has taken sort of the biggest hit in this COVID season. And I
Mhm.
would say that probably I was more intentional with them prior to that. And so I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I think that I want to work more intentionally to build community here without being afraid. And I think that prior to COVID, for me, there was a lot of fear associated with it. And so now there's this other level of like, how do we go about this? But I just need to build into the relationships that I have started and just kind of feel those out and not be afraid to even just reach out. So just to start working on those a little bit more, I guess.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
What about you?
Yeah, so I think that this year has left me feeling disconnected in a lot of
Mm,
ways from people. And, we've already hit on a lot of the reasons for that. But like, even though at church we've had in person services, we were outside all summer, we switched to inside, we've had, but it's been very different than the normal. And any kind of small groups that have been happening, have been very different as well. And I just haven't been in person with groups of people like I normally would,
mm,
whether it's at church or, girlfriends locally. So that definitely, those two aspects of my life, I'm feeling like I need to be more intentional about reaching out to those people, even if they're not people that I necessarily like am in a close relationship with, that I'm
mm,
talking to on a regular basis. I
yeah.
still want to make that effort. And I feel like it's harder to do that because of the circumstances like you're pointing out. Like, are they going to want to meet up and go to a restaurant, or are they going to want to just do everything on Zoom, or do they not like Zoom and do they want to just stay at home and be by themselves? Like, there's so many
Right.
factors to it
Yeah.
when you're trying to make those connections, that it just sometimes it's like, oh, maybe I shouldn't even try. But
Mm,
I know that's not a healthy
yeah.
place to like decide not to try. So I would say that's what I want to do differently in the coming months, is be more intentional about reaching out to some of the additional people that I care about.
Mm. I
So,
think that's a good conversation to kind of realize your support system and figure out what was good and what needs to still have a little work on it,
yeah,
especially after
right.
this year.
Yeah.
So another part of relationships that we want to talk about is criticism that we've received as a leader. So,
So much fun.
as we talked about with Sandy, this year has been a little bit different in that. I mean, obviously, as leaders, we get criticized often, but this has taken on a whole new level. So,
Yeah. Mhm.
how have you experienced criticism in your leadership this year, Esther?
Yeah. So I would say, okay, I have kind of a two-part answer. One is in terms of church situations, I'm not on the receiving end of
Mm,
criticism in those situations. I'm not leading any particular big ministry. I'm a wife of one of the pastors
right, right.
and not even the senior pastor. So, but what I have seen is I have seen the criticism lobbed at them, at
Mm,
the leadership, at the elders, at the pastors. And I definitely have been affected by it because it kind of creates some anger inside of me because I see how much prayer and seeking God and seeking wisdom goes into some of the decisions that have been made.
mm,
And then I see people making assumptions and lobbying criticism at people without really taking the time to ask or be curious about the decisions that were made. And it just, to
that's
me,
a no-go.
it's not okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to disagree with church leadership or leadership in general.
Mhm.
I don't think you're always going to agree with your leader, but the way that you address those questions and those concerns, I think, is super important. And I don't think it's okay to call into question their character.
Mhm.
I don't think it's okay to just make assumptions about why they're doing certain things without asking.
Yeah.
So that's part one. So I've been affected by it sort of on a secondary level, I guess. The other thing I would say is I have been criticized just within my own like online world, we have our Purposeful Leadership Facebook group. I'm sometimes on other people's podcasts and these different places. And I've had some people that have criticized me for various things and even called out my character, and my faith was called into question in one instance. And I was like, okay, that doesn't feel great. So
Yeah.
that's the way I've experienced it this year. What about you?
So my answer feels a little, I don't know, but I think honestly, because of the transition and because I haven't really been acting in any super like leadership roles, it's been really, the podcast and my business. It hasn't been like through church or anything. I haven't experienced a lot of that, but if I'm being totally honest, I have been much more critical of myself than anyone has been of me. I'm very, very critical of myself. And so probably just hearing all of my self-talk about it is probably just as bad as what other people might, I don't know, they might be saying it, just not to me, which is fine.
Oh.
So yeah.
Okay.
So how have you handled it when you have had this happen to you?
Okay. Why do we have to talk about these things?
You're the one who wrote this question, man.
I wrote it before I thought about my answers.
Well, and remember we talked about with Sandy that we don't want to just glaze over things. We do need to deal with them to move forward. So
exactly.
I'm here for you.
Well, and I really think that this is an issue that our audience needs to hear, because
definitely.
many of you are experiencing criticism like never before. And it doesn't mean it's not just in the church. It's like anybody in a leadership role this year had to make decisions that they never thought they would have to make. And I just don't think there's any way around it that you would have been criticized at some point if you were leading and making some of these decisions. So I have definitely realized the importance of praying for leaders more this year. And so praying for them specifically in their decision making, as well as praying for wisdom for myself in how I'm handling things, even though I'm not calling the shots on some of these bigger issues. I've just been praying on how I handle the conversations I'm in, or, things like that. And then just in terms of how I've handled it when I received criticism directly on me, I definitely don't enjoy it. I get a little upset and feel like I don't like feeling like someone else thinks I did something wrong. I don't know what it is that it says about my personality or some sort of whacked out trait I have, but I definitely do not like feeling like I have done something wrong. Even if I know in my heart I did nothing wrong, I don't like it if someone else thinks I did.
Yeah.
And it's stupid because I cannot control what they think, right? I cannot change what they think. If they think I did something wrong, there's nothing I can do to change that. But I definitely have had to pray. I've had to do some deep breathing before responding to people. And then also reaching out to get other people's support, like Holly. When I'm like sending her messages like, this is what they said. Wow, what do we do? And kind of having someone else help me calm down. So that's myself. What about you in terms of how you've handled your own criticism towards yourself? That's a unique situation.
Well, so I was thinking about it as you were kind of talking, and I think I've experienced this in the past, and I don't know if maybe this is a little bit of part of your own kind of thing too, but like, I'm so critical of myself that when someone else points it out or says the same thing, it's like compounded that much more. And so maybe that's why it's so difficult for me to, I mean, I can handle a certain level of criticism, but if it's something that I am critical about already, then it's like very difficult.
That makes it way worse.
Way worse.
That's awful.
Yeah. So as far as just me being critical of myself, and, I was kind of thinking about this in sort of one lane, and I have had criticism within my business too, and whatever. But anyway, I think I've been impatient with how God is working out my leadership story here. And I continue to tell myself that I have been needing to do something, but what I really need to do is trust in God's timing while still it's kind of a two-pronged approach, like trusting in him, and he's going to give me the sort of opportunities that he wants me to walk in, while also not staying in my own bubble and kind of stepping out as often as I can and often as appropriate. They say it's easier to steer a ship that's moving than to steer one that's kind
Right.
of sitting still. So I don't know. It's a fine line for me because I am very critical. I feel like I should be doing X, Y, and Z. And if I'm not doing those things, then what does it say about me? And like, those are the type of thoughts that I have. So it's so crazy how we talk to ourselves, right?
Yeah.
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 So
That's not what God is saying.
no, I have come to realize that, but I'm not good at stopping the train of thought sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. Okay.
So what do you want to change about how you respond to criticism?
Okay. So I think what I want to do is do more of what Sandy talked about in our episode,
Yes.
where she said, take it to God.
Yeah.
Take the criticism to God and really have him remind me of who I am and of my value and my worth, and really recognizing that the criticism is not who I am. That's not who I am. And certainly there are times that we receive criticism, and I guess we should kind of just make a distinction here that this is criticism not from someone close to you who's like providing feedback that you actually need to work on.
Yeah.
It's more like unwarranted criticism or just completely just public blasting. I mean, we've done a whole episode about criticism before, so we've talked more in depth about that, but we're talking more about like things that people are saying that's just not true about you. That I definitely need to, instead of just allowing my emotions to take over or allowing myself just to feel like, oh my word, what did I do? I hurt them, or I did something to wrong them when I didn't actually.
Yeah.
And truly just taking that to God and saying, okay, help me deal with this, So that's what I feel like I need to change to do things differently.
Yeah.
So what about you?
So I think for me, I don't want to immediately believe what it is, and not necessarily from a denial standpoint, but from a gaining appropriate perspective standpoint. So for me, and I think if you have negative self-talk, like most people do, oftentimes like you just immediately believe it. But I do this as well with other people's criticism as well. I immediately believe that it's true. And sometimes it's really important to be able to stop and go, okay, is this true? And for me, if I could just stop at that point and go, okay, is what they're saying or what I'm thinking about myself true? And at that point, it would then spur me on to go, okay, God, is this true? Or to look at his word and figure out if it's true, or to look about what he says about my identity, like what you were talking about. Because I know that I get mixed up about truth, right? Like, so in my own head and in my own sinful heart and brain and stuff like that, I get confused about what truth is. And, Satan is a very good deceiver. So he's really good at weaving lies in our minds, or getting into our sort of unconscious thoughts about things. And so for me, if I can just sort of stop myself in my tracks and go, okay, is this actually true? And then going from there, I think is really important. So yeah. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay, good.
Awesome. Okay. So that was our our quote unquote short episode.
I know. Oh my gosh.
We didn't know how long it would take us to talk through this.
This is true.
I think our audience knows us well enough. If you're new around here, now you know.
Yeah.
We are not short podcasters.
We are not.
When we do solo episodes, they're shorter for
They
sure.
are.
Like your episode that you did about peace was shorter, and the other episodes I've done have been shorter, but it's because there's only one of us talking.
It's true.
So it's not a conversation. Anyway, we want you to get the questions. So be sure to go grab the PDF. Again, you can go to the show notes for this episode. If you're listening in a podcast app, just go down and click. I'll try to have a link in there where you can click right over to grab that PDF. But as we usually do, we like to wrap things up with a fun question. So we have a follow-up to the question we asked last time. Well, I don't know where we get these questions. Holly usually finds them. She's good at finding these waxed out
Some
questions.
random place on the internet, and it's
Yeah.
always different every time.
Yeah. It's like you would think we would just have like a list that we can just like look at quickly and pull one from, but no, it's usually scrambling. But we did decide to ask a follow-up to this. So last time we asked, what was a food you have never tried that you want to try?
Mm-hmm.
And today we're saying, what food have you eaten and you never want to eat it again? Okay. So go for it.
Okay.
What about you?
So many things come to mind. But when we were in Guatemala, there was this one village we went to that they served us some sort of root vegetable and hen. Do you remember this?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh wow. I would be okay with never having that again. And I feel so ungrateful saying that, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what they had and they gave it with love and I so appreciated it. And like they probably fed me instead of feeding their kids that day. So it just makes me feel like a horrible person saying that. But if we're talking about simply going on taste, not intention or love, that's my answer.
Okay.
I had to say all of that because it makes me feel like such a bad person.
No, but if you have ever traveled internationally, specifically if you've ever done a missions trip, you know what Holly's talking about because there are times where you are served food and that often it's a sacrifice for them to serve it. But
it is.
And if you don't eat it, you're being disrespectful. But at the same time, you eat it and you're like, I hope I can get through this meal without like throwing up. Well, because it's different. It's something you're not used to, or it could truly be like you just might not like it. Just taste buds don't like it.
So the first time I went, I was actually a vegetarian. I didn't eat meat at all.
Oh my.
And so, and beef is not something that is, I'm not saying that it's not common, but they eat more like chicken and smaller animals because they don't have the room for cows, I guess, or whatever. It's harder for them to cultivate beef.
Yeah.
And so that was given to us one time and I had everything I could do to eat it.
Oh no.
So anyway, that's not what we're talking about. And it's your turn.
Okay. So my turn. Okay. So very similar circumstances. I was in Nicaragua. No, wait, was it Nicaragua? No, sorry. It was Honduras. I was in Honduras. Got my countries mixed up. And it was a mission trip. We were actually staying or working at a church that was inside of like a banana plantation. Like we were surrounded by banana trees everywhere. It was pretty cool. I loved the location. It was beautiful. But one day we were having lunch and they offered us, they were like, oh, we have bananas. They're boiled bananas. And I was like, oh, sure, I'll try it. Because I'm very, like we talked about, I will now try almost anything. And I thought, I love bananas, so why not? It wasn't even like a thing you had to have. It was a voluntary situation. And I voluntarily said yes to this. Oh my word. It's like, just think of bananas and then take out all the taste and turn it all to starch. And then you have boiled bananas.
Is it just mushy? It's like just, porridge kind of?
Oh, no, it was like they were still like intact. They were intact. Like they weren't squished or anything. It was just, I think I've sort of blocked out the memory, so I don't remember a lot of the specifics of how they looked, but I do know, I'm pretty sure they were still like intact and you sort of just cut them and ate them. But it was just like, oh man, no, not a thing I want to do again.
Well,
because they would just like mush and like no taste. And just all starch.
Was there anything served with it or did you just eat it like that?
It was just like that. Just banana.
So
like I needed some good chocolate sauce or something on top of that.
So this is related to some extent. So when Pastor David and his wife Fabiola came to the States, they stayed with us in Maine for a little while. And this is the pastor that we know in Guatemala. And his wife was feeling a little ill, just sick to her stomach, which you do as you travel. That happened. Yeah. And so she was like, can we go buy some plantains? And I was like, okay. So we went and bought plantains and she boiled the plantain peels and drank the liquid. And she said, this is really good for your stomach and your gut and stuff. So
Oh,
like, that
interesting.
totally reminded me of that. And I was like, okay, wow, this is interesting.
Yeah.
I just boiling anything in relation to a banana or a plantain has never crossed my mind.
Yeah. Like fry it up. Let's fry it up, people.
Fried
Frying is different.
plantains. Oh,
Fried plantains are where it's at.
if you've never had a fried plantain, you go find yourself one and you eat it.
Yeah.
And then you message us and say thank you. And we'll say you're
Well,
welcome.
you got to make sure you fry it properly. Like
that's what I mean. Don't go do it yourself. Go find someone who knows how to do it. Like go to a restaurant where they serve fried plantains.
Good idea.
Or find someone who knows what they're doing.
Okay.
Because I've tried to fry plantains myself before and I'm not that great at it.
I have done it. So are you talking about the fried plantains that are still kind of like they're softer and mushier, or are you talking about the crunchy ones? Because there's two ways to do it.
I'm not talking about the almost like dehydrated chip like ones, the ones that are soft that like get a little caramelization on the outside and they're like like pan fried.
Yeah. So I have done the other kind that are more almost like plantain chips.
Okay.
But you double fry them and then you pound them and you fry them and then you pound them and then you fry them again. And
what are those called?
On them. Oh, they're so good.
Tostones?
Fried plantains.
No.
Tostones. Yes, that's what they are.
I like a regular fried plantain more than I like tostones.
I'm all about the tostones because I like the crunch. So
I like the caramelization and the softness. Those ones feel like dessert. Okay, now I'm hungry.
Oh my word. Okay. All right.
Anyway.
Well, thank you for being with us today, and we will be back next week. Oh wait, this episode is going to go out like the week of Christmas. So Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Our friends. We need to say Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. So, I hope that you have a wonderful time with your family and that you feel cozy, and go look at lights and think of me. Oh, and watch a Charlie Brown Christmas.
Yeah. Yes. Right.
That's the best movie.
All right. Okay. So we will talk to you next week to talk about goals and dreaming, because we're getting ready for the new year. So we'll see you then. Thanks for joining us on the Christian Women Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, come and join us in our private Facebook community. We would love to get to know you better so that we can make sure the podcast is providing what you need. Plus, you can share your questions and ideas, and you'll be surrounded by incredible Christian women leaders. To join the group, visit estherlittlefield.com/group. Now, don't forget, your leadership matters, and it's time for you to embrace your gifts and lead with confidence.
Wow. I was just thinking about getting outside and I was just imagining how good it is. And you described it so well. I know that sounds really stupid, but okay.
Or talk to you then.